So for today, we are basically just practicing the quadratic stuff that we've learned so far. I'm going to remind you about such greatest hits as the discriminant and how it tells you how many real answers you're going to have. The X-Intercepts, which is usually, if you can factor it, you should. Otherwise, you go to the quadratic. Then writing things in vertex form with that complete the square. And then the more complicated complete the square is something a max or a min, and that basically is just the negative in front. So you need to cover a lot of little things. So I'm going to give you a problem here on the very first page that'll tell us a lot. Do you remember the whole if you can factor it, you should thing? Factor this one out and tell me what its roots are. Then I'd like you to use the quadratic formula to get the roots. It'll be the same answers. But this tests to see if you know the two major ways, which are factoring to get them and quadratic formula to get them. Okay? And the nice part is you'll know what you're supposed to get because you'll have already done it by factoring. All right, I'm going to pause for a second. Let me give that one a try. Okay, so here's what I'm hoping you did. You got a 2x and you got an x so that you can make the 2x squared. And then you have a 1 and you have a 1. And 1 times 1 makes 1. And then nothing here adds up to 3 until you multiply the outsides and the insides. The outsides and the insides, when multiplied together, they will add up to the 3x. Okay, cool. So what are the answers? X equals -1 for this part. And x equals not -1 over there. It's negative. Well, I'm going to check it. This again, a lot of people just on the test, I was amazed how many people said, they just looked at this number, I think, and then they said -1 for this side. And it should be 2x plus 1 equals 0, 2x equals -1, x equals -1/2. Okay, now, I asked you to also do it with the quadratic formula. I'll do it real quick. So x equals -3 plus or minus square root of b squared, which is 9, minus 4ac, 4 times 2 times 1, all over 2a, which is 2 times 2, which is 4. So then you have -3 plus and minus the square root of, that's 9 minus 8, which is 1, all over 4. So some kids have a bad habit of leaving this as a problem. They leave it like that. We already know the answers. They're -1 and -1/2. You've got to get that finished. So -3 plus the 1 makes -2/4, which is -1/2. And -3 minus 1 over 4 is -4 over 4, which is -1, and there's the answers both ways. Okay, what else could you be expected to know on the test? Which, by the way, at this point, is planned for tomorrow. So what else do you have to know? Well, you'd have to know how to do this little thing called complete the square. Now, this would be a particularly nasty one because it's got a lead number of 2, and you get how you theoretically have to factor out this part right here, and yet it doesn't have a nice number that goes into both of them, and so that's not the kind that we would typically ask you to do with complete the square. But if you needed to find the vertex, there's a formula for that. There's an app for that. Do you remember what the formula for complete the square is? Not complete square, for the vertex. There's 2 things in the quadratic formula that are buried in there. That's one of them. And that's if this part is 0, if b squared minus 4ac equals 0, then that's going to cancel all of that. And then you'll have one answer, and it'll be the discriminant is 0, yes, but what I'm saying is this answer that you would have after this discriminant was 0 would be the vertex. So that's the vertex form. You got to know that formula. It's just part of the quadratic formula. All right. So let's do that. Just find the x of the vertex. We know our roots. Let's find the x of the vertex. I think it often helps to look at your parabola and see, okay, I know it goes through -1, and I also know it goes through -1/2. Let's say this is -1 and this is -1/2. So my parabola kind of looks like this. And your vertex is that spot right down there. I'll make it a blue dot. And that would be x equals, and the -b part would be the -3 part over 2a, which is 2 times 2, which is 4, -3/4. And does that make sense? Yeah, it runs right between -1/2 and -1. That's also this dotted line that runs down here called the axis of symmetry. I sometimes called it the axis of symmetry. Was x equals -3/4. Okay. Could you have gotten that without me? Okay, good. Then, what's the vertex? Well, this would be kind of gross. You'd have to say it's -3/4, comma something, and all I would say is, I hope you know, you would put the -3/4 into the equation in either of these forms, that form, or stretched out like this, factored out. You could put -3/4 in either way, and you could get the other part of your vertex. This is an ugly enough one. I'm not going to waste your time on it. We'll waste your time on something else. Everybody go to this page. It's the second page. Now, they want us to find D. That's the standard, like, letter for take a wild guess. What do you think? Discriminant. Remember that discriminant is b squared minus 4ac, but you do not square root it. If you were doing the quadratic formula, you would, but not for discriminant. What if the discriminant comes out positive? You have how many answers? 2. What if it comes out negative? You have how many real answers?
0.
None. And if it comes out to 1, the discriminant, no, sorry, comes out to 0, then you have 1 answer, and it is the vertex. I'm going to say that one more time. If the discriminant is positive, then you have 2 answers. If it's negative, you have no answers. And if it's 0, you have 1 answer, and it's the vertex. All right. The X-Intercepts, it says radical. That means you'll have a square root in that kind of an answer. That means it's like 1 plus and minus the square root of 7 over 3. That's an answer for the X-Intercepts that's radical. Decimal answer, that means you grab your calculator and you get a decimal for square root of 7, and you take 1 plus that divided by 3 and 1 minus that divided by 3, and you get your 2 answers as decimals. Vertex form means you'd have to know that formula we just did. B squared, x equals -b over 2a. And then, last but not least, if you've got vertex form, you must have the vertex, and they kind of go together. All right, so there's a quick reminder. Oh, max and min, and that just tells you, is it a normal parabola, or is there a negative in front, so it's been flipped upside down? There's no negative, so this is a normal parabola. So I hope you can picture that and tell whether you have a max or a min. All right, so there's a quick talk through. Try to find all of these answers. This will require a calculator, and that implies there will be a calculator allowed on tomorrow's test. Or either that or they can't ask you for the decimal answer. One or the other. All right, pause for a second and give that a try. Okay, I'm going to start working through this, and let's see if we got the same thing. The discriminant, b squared, ooh, that's a big number, but it's not that hard. 20 times 20 is 400, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 2. So it's 400 minus 16. That's 384. Now, do I square root it? No. So, double checking myself to make sure I didn't do anything stupid. B squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 2, I believe I did it right. Raise your hand if you also got 384. Okay, good. So then that is our discriminant. What does it tell us about how many roots there's going to be? 2 solutions. That's pretty much always the follow-up question. So if you had the discriminant as positive, it's 2. Negative, there's none. If the discriminant comes out to 0, then there's only one answer, and it's the vertex. Okay, X-intercepts. Since you're this far with the quadratic formula, you may as well do it with the quadratic formula, you know, because that's the thing underneath the root. So I'm going to go x equals negative b, which is 20, plus or minus the square root of 384, all over 2a, which is 2 times 2 is 4. And if I'm allowed to use a decimal, this will just require my calculator and finding the square root of 384. There's usually somebody who's got their calculator out. I see a couple in the front row over here. Would you guys tell me what the square root of 384 is? If you double check each other, that would be awesome.
Yeah, 19.65.
19.65, thank you. So then this is 19.65. So then it's 20 plus and minus 19.65 all over 4. That's your decimal answers. You'd have to actually do it. 20 plus 19.65 divided by 4 and 20 minus 19.65 divided by 4. All right, vertex form. Oh, x-intercepts as a radical. This is the x-intercepts as a radical. I already have it. It's right there. Now I'm going to take a second to talk about vertex. X equals negative b over 2a, which is 20 over 2 times 2, which is 4. X equals 20 over 4. X equals 5. So x equals 5 is your x of your vertex. So it's 5 comma something. How do I figure out what the something is? I stick the 5 in. 5 goes in there and there. So 2 times 25 minus 20 times 5 plus 2. 50 minus 100 plus 2. That's going to be negative 50 plus 2, which would be negative 48. Can anybody verify they got negative 48? Awesome. Okay, vertex form then. Y equals, and oh, there's going to be a lot of people that do this. X minus 5, you'll remember, hopefully that's the opposite of the 5, squared minus 48, and they'll forget something important. What did I leave out? Did you even notice that there's a 2 in the front? A stretch factor of 2. So you needed to have a stretch factor of 2 right there. That black 2 is really important. And last but not least, does it have a max or a min? Well, from just looking at it, there's no negative in the front. I know this is a right side up parabola. Okay? And if I know it's a right side up parabola, then it has a minimum. And the minimum is at this spot right here. The lowest it goes to is negative 48 if you wanted to put that. But usually all we want you to say is it has a min. Okay, that covers a lot. Let's go to this next page. Why is this any different? I'm going to remind you how to do, you know what, this is, if I were doing this, I would not do complete the square. Even though I could take the 2 off of here and here, but it'll have a 3 left over, which makes it really gross. If I really wanted to find the vertex on this one, I'd do x equals negative b over 2a. So go ahead and find the vertex in the vertex form, but I'd do it with negative b over 2a personally. If you want to do it by completing the square, you can. I'm going to show you the completing the square just in case you feel like it's been too long and you've forgotten how to do that. So there's a quick review of how to do it with complete the square. I factored the 2 out into the front, and then I took half and square of this and put it there. And then I showed you how when I multiplied this -2 by this, it leads to this, which ends up being -9/2. So then I had to add +9/2 at the end to cancel it back out again, because otherwise you can't just add things to an equation unless you cancel them with something that's the opposite of that. And since this is actually 4.5, half of 9, then all said and done, this is 20 plus 4.5 is 24.5, goes right there. So there is vertex form. If you had done it with -b/2a, it'd have been 6/4, which is 3/2, and I would have gotten a lot faster. 3/2 is that part. Then the hard part, either way, is figuring out this last number. And I would take the 3/2 and stick it in the equation. I would have probably just taken it and stuck it in here and here. And since I have a calculator on the test, I would have multiplied that all out with a calculator. And I would have got my 24.5 that way. All right, that's a review of the toughest stuff. Let's get the actual answers for all of these. The discriminant was b², which is 36 minus 4 times -2 times 20. Can you help me out? What did that come out to? What'd you get? Anybody verify 196? Yes? Okay. And the X-Intercepts, X equals -20. Nope, -6, sorry. Plus and minus the square root of 196 all over 2a, which is 2 times -2, which makes -4. And this happens to work out nice because that is 14. So it's really -6 plus and minus 14 all over -4. So that's -6 plus 14 over -4, which is 8 over -4, which is -2. So one of my X-intercepts is -2. And if they're X-intercepts, Y is 0. And this one doesn't have a radical because this turned out nice. All right. Then the other one, -6, sorry, minus 14 over -4, which would be -20 over -4, which is +5. And if they're X-intercepts, their Y is 0. This would be the same as that because the radical, there was no radical. Vertex form we already did back here. The vertex itself, 3/2, also known as 1.5, comma 24.5. Is it a max or a min? Because there's a negative in the front of this whole equation right there, then it's a max. Now, we just went through a ton of math. Oh my gosh. This second part is usually harder for kids than the first part. The reason we took a whole day to do this is I know there might be one of these things that you're like, oh, I still don't get this part. So that's what you get to do in the last half of class is just ask me questions. We'll work on homework. I'll give you the assignment. I'll cut it down in size. And then if there's any of these things that I just went over that you were lost on, like, I did not get that, today is a great day to catch up on that. Tomorrow I have to teach you new stuff again, which is about basically real world situations, like a ball has been thrown in the air and you're trying to figure out how high it went. That's the vertex. when the ball hit the ground, that's the quadratic formula, that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's the last thing, and then we have a review day, and then we take the test. Okay. All right, I'm going to move to just this last page. Not even going to do it, we're just going to talk about it. What's D stand for again? So it's b squared minus 4ac. You could do that. And what if it comes out positive? What happens?
There are two solutions.
Two solutions. What if it comes out negative?
No solution.
No solutions. And if it comes out to 0?
One.
One solution, and it is the vertex. Okay, good. The X-Intercepts, I'd use the quadratic formula because I'd already done the discriminant, and that's the b squared minus 4ac, right? You already done half of the hard part of the quadratic formula. For vertex form, I would find the vertex either by x equals negative b over 2a, or I would do complete the square. If I look at these two numbers and they're icky like this, like not easy to factor the 3 out, I don't want to do complete the square. It's going to be too much of a pain. So I'd probably use this negative b over 2a. Once I have the x, that's the x of the vertex, and to find the y, you just stick whatever this number was into this function here. All right. So your assignment is the worksheet called More Quadratic Practice worksheet. And if you could pull that up on your iPad, I will tell you which problems you can skip. I'm going to pause for a second while you do that. So in looking at the worksheet, I think that I want you to do problems 1, 2, and 3. I'm giving you a fair amount of time in class to do it, so I don't think we need to cut it down any more than that. If you feel like number 4 would benefit you after doing 1, 2, and 3 and like maybe getting stumped, then you should definitely do it. It's optional, though. Problem 4 is optional. All right, that's all I got for you for today.